Your Apple ID is the single most valuable target on your iPhone, and right now it is under attack from criminals who have shifted their focus specifically toward Apple users. Your Apple ID is not just a login for the App Store. It is the master key to your iCloud, which holds your photos, your messages, your notes, your contacts, your device backups, your saved passwords through iCloud Keychain, your payment methods, and the location of all your Apple devices through Find My. If a criminal takes control of your Apple ID, they gain access to all of that simultaneously. And in 2025 and 2026, the security community has documented a clear and alarming trend. Attackers are increasingly targeting Apple users specifically, abandoning their traditional focus on other platforms, because the value locked behind a single Apple ID has become too tempting to ignore. The cybersecurity publication CyberGuy reported that in just the first 4 months of 2025, there were over 10 documented instances where attackers specifically targeted Apple users, and those were only the incidents that became publicly known. The analysis described a growing trend where bad actors prefer targeting Apple users over other platforms. This is a significant shift. For years, the conventional wisdom held that Apple devices were inherently safer and less targeted than the alternatives. That assumption is no longer reliable, and continuing to believe it is exactly what makes Apple users vulnerable. This video is going to explain exactly how these attacks work, walk through the real documented campaigns that have targeted Apple users recently, and give you the specific steps directly from Apple's own security guidance to lock down your Apple ID so that even a sophisticated attacker cannot take it over. Let us start with how Apple ID account takeover actually happens, because understanding the mechanism is what makes the defenses make sense. The single most common pathway is phishing. A phishing attack against your Apple ID begins with a message, an email, a text, or even a phone call that appears to come from Apple. The message warns you about a problem with your account. Maybe it says there was a suspicious sign-in, an unauthorized purchase, or that your account will be locked unless you take immediate action. The message creates urgency and fear, because fear makes people react without thinking carefully. And it provides a link or a phone number to resolve the supposed problem. If you click the link, it takes you to a website that looks exactly like Apple's real sign-in page. The design is identical, the layout is identical, the branding is identical. The only difference is the web address, and even that is often disguised using subtle tricks. Guardio's security research documented one common technique where a phishing URL uses a capital letter I to mimic a lowercase l, making a fraudulent domain appear nearly identical to Apple's real domain at a glance. When you enter your Apple ID and password on that fake page, the credentials go directly to the criminal rather than to Apple. Within moments, they have your login and can begin taking over your account. A particularly sophisticated campaign documented by Bleeping Computer in April 2026 illustrates how advanced the C attacks have become. The attackers found a way to abuse Apple's own account change alert system to send phishing emails that came from Apple's legitimate infrastructure. The emails were sent from the address appleid@id.apple.com and passing all the technical authentication checks that normally verify an email is genuinely from Apple, including SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. These emails told recipients that changes had been made to their Apple account and were designed to scare them into thinking their account had been used for fraudulent purchases. The goal was to get victims to call a phone number where scammers posing as Apple support would convince them their account was compromised and instruct them to install remote access software or hand over financial information. Because the emails genuinely came from Apple's systems and passed every authentication check, even careful users had no technical way to identify them as fraudulent based on the sender alone. The second major pathway to Apple ID compromise is credential theft through data breaches and InfoStealer malware. In May 2025, Apple Magazine reported on an Apple ID data breach that exposed millions of unencrypted login and credentials. Critically, this breach was not the result of an attack on Apple's servers. The credentials had been harvested from users' own devices by InfoStealer malware, software that silently extracts saved passwords from browsers and apps. The malware infiltrated devices through phishing emails, malicious apps, and unsecured websites, quietly, collecting credentials including Apple ID logins and compiling them into a database that was left accessible online. This illustrates a crucial point. Even though Apple's own security is strong, your Apple ID credentials can be stolen from outside Apple's ecosystem on your own device through malware that you may not even know is present. The danger is amplified by password reuse. If you use the same password for your Apple ID that you use for other accounts, then a breach of any one of those other accounts exposes your Apple ID. Criminals use a technique called credential stuffing, where stolen username and password combinations from one breach are automatically tested against many other services. if your Apple ID password matches a password expose. D, in any breach of any service you have ever used. Credential stuffing can hand a criminal access to your Apple ID without any phishing required. Now, here are the specific steps to protect your Apple ID, drawn directly from Apple's own security guidance and from the recommendations of the security researchers who study these attacks. These are in order of importance. The first and most fundamental step is to enable two-factor authentication for your Apple ID if you Have not already. Two-factor authentication means that signing into your Apple ID requires not just your password, but also a verification code that is sent to or generated on our trusted devices. With two-factor authentication enabled, even if a criminal steals your password through phishing or a data breach, they cannot sign into your account without also having access to one of your trusted Apple devices. To check this, I go to Settings, tap your name at the top, tap Sign In and Security, and look at the two-factor authentication status. If it is not on, turn it on. This single step blocks the majority of account takeover attempts because T makes a stolen password insufficient on its own. The second step, for users who want the strongest possible protection against the sophisticated phishing attacks that have been targeting Apple users, is to set up security keys for your Apple ID. Apple's own support guidance specifically recommends security keys for extra protection against target D attacks such as phishing. A security key is a physical hardware device that you use to verify your identity when signing in, because the key is a physical object that may be present. A remote attacker who has your password cannot complete a sign-in even if they also manage to intercept a verification code. Security keys are immune to phishing because there is no code for the attacker to steal. To set them up, go to Settings, tap your name, tap Sign In and Security, and look for the option to add security keys. You need 2 compatible hardware keys to set this up, which provides a backup if one is lost. The third step is to turn on stolen device protection, which Apple introduced to protect against the scenario where someone has both your physical iPhone and your passcode. Apple's guidance recommends this for additional protection in the rare instance when someone else has your iPhone and knows your passcode. When stolen device protection is on, certain sensitive actions like changing your Apple ID password require Face ID or Touch ID biometric verification with no passcode fallback. And some actions require a security delay of an hour. This means that even a thief who watched you type your passcode and then stole your phone cannot immediately take over your Apple ID. To enable it, go to Settings, tap Face ID and passcode, and look for stolen device protection. The fourth step is to use a strong, unique password for your Apple ID that you do not use anywhere else. Because credential stuffing relies on password reuse, Ving a password that is unique to your Apple ID means that a breach of any other service cannot expose your Apple ID. The best way to manage unique passwords for every account is a password manager, which generates and stores strong, unique passwords, so you do not have to remember them. Apple's built-in passwords app, available in iOS, can do this, as can third-party password managers. If your Apple ID currently uses a password that you also use for other accounts, change it to a unique one today. The fifth step is learning to recognize and resist phishing attempts because technical protections are most effective when combined with the awareness that prevents you from handing over your credentials in the first place. The key principle is this: Apple will never ask you to provide your password, verification codes, or other sensitive information through an email, a text message, or an unsolicited phone call. If you receive any message claiming to be from Apple that asks you to click a link to verify your account, log in to resolve a problem, or call a number about suspicious activity, treat it as a phishing attempt regardless of how legitimate it appears. The April 2026 campaign proved that phishing emails can come from Apple's genuine infrastructure and pass every authentication check, which means you cannot rely on the sender address alone to verify legitimacy. Instead of clicking any link in a message, navigate to your Apple account independently. If you receive a message claiming there is a problem with your Apple ID, do not use any link or phone number in the message. Instead, open Settings on your iPhone directly, tap your name, and check your account status there. Or go to appleid.apple.com by typing the address yourself in a browser. If there is a genuine issue with your account, it will be visible through these official channels that you accessed independently. If you accessed your account directly and see no problem, the message that claimed there was a problem was a phishing attempt. The sixth step is to regularly review the devices and account access associated with your Apple ID. Go to Settings, tap your name, and scroll down to see the list of devices signed into your Apple ID. Review this list and remove any device you do not recognize or no longer use. A device you do not recognize signed into your account is a serious warning sign that your account may already be compromised. Apple's guidance is clear that you should be the only person who can sign into your Apple account, and that if someone you do not know or trust can sign in, your account is not secure. If you believe your Apple ID has already been compromised, Apple provides a specific response procedure. Sign into your Apple account and change your password to a strong new one immediately. Review and update your security information, including your trusted phone numbers and trusted devices, removing anything you do not recognize. Check that your account information, including your name, your primary email address, and your security settings have not been altered by an attack here. And review your Apple ID purchase history and payment methods for any unauthorized activity. If you cannot sign in because an attacker has changed your password, use Apple's account recovery process to regain control. The broader context for all of this is that Apple itself is investing heavily in fighting fraud across its ecosystem, which is both reassuring and a reminder of the scale of the threat. Security Week reported that Apple rejected over 2 million app submissions and blocked over 1.1 billion fraudulent accounts in the App Store in 2025, along with blocking $2.2 billion in potentially fraudulent transactions. Those numbers reflect the enormous scale of the criminal activity targeting Apple's platform and the resources Apple is dedicating to defending against it. But Apple's platform-level defenses cannot protect your individual account if you hand your credentials to a phishing site or reuse a password that gets exposed in a breach. Your individual account security is ultimately in your hands. Your Apple ID protects your entire digital life within Apple's ecosystem. The criminals targeting it have become more sophisticated, more focused on Apple users specifically, and more capable of producing convincing attacks that even careful users struggle to identify. The defenses, however, are somewhat specific and effective. Enable two-factor authentication. Consider security keys for maximum protection. Turn on stolen device protection. Use a unique password. Recognize and resist phishing, and regularly review the devices signed into your account. The fourth consideration is the importance of your trusted phone number and recovery options. Because your Apple ID can be recovered through your trusted phone number, that phone number becomes a potential target. This connects the Apple ID threat to the SIM swapping threat, because an attacker who takes over our phone number through a SIM swap could potentially use it in an Apple ID recovery attempt. Keeping your Apple ID protected with two-factor authentication that relies on your trusted devices rather than solely on SMS, and securing your phone number against SIM swapping through your carrier addresses both threats together. The strongest configuration uses your trusted Apple devices and security K, IOIs for verification rather than relying on a phone number that could be compromised. Bringing all of this together, the picture for Apple ID security in 2026 is that the threat is real and growing, the attacks have become genuinely sophisticated, and Apple users can no longer rely on the assumption that their platform is inherently safe from these attacks. But the defenses are entirely within reach. The combination of two-factor authentication, security keys for those who want maximum protection, stolen device protection, a unique password, phishing awareness, regular device review, and for sensitive data. Advanced DAT. A protection creates a security posture that defeats the overwhelming majority of attacks documented against Apple users. The most important thing is to act before you are targeted rather than after. The Florida and other documented victims of account takeover did not have these protections fully in place when they were attacked. The 15 minutes it takes to enable two-factor authentication, turn on stolen device protection, verify your password is unique, and review your signed-in devices is the difference between an attack that fails harmlessly and one that succeeds catastrophically. Open your settings today, tap your name, go to Sign In and Security, and work through these protections. Your Apple ID is the key to your entire digital life within Apple's ecosystem.